Hey there. So we said earlier that story estimation is always a team activity. But why is that? Well, for one thing, during estimation, the team won't know exactly who will be implementing which part of each story. And if we try to figure this out up front, that is, if we try to assign each piece of work to a developer up front, we'd lose the flexibility as we go into the sprint. And a second reason for team estimation is that many stories can involve multiple developers, one to do the UI design and coding, and another to do testing, and so on. In other words, they have to work together. And when everyone estimates together, the whole team understands the work that has to be done for all aspects of the story, and that really increases the likelihood of the team members helping each other during the sprint. And finally, any differences in opinion on the work involved can be examined and investigated upfront in the form of a discussion that happens during team estimation, and this then helps avoid any unpleasant surprises during the sprint. So the whole team has to do estimation, but how do they go about doing it? Well, if you simply brought the whole team together and asked them to provide an estimate, normally the person who understands the story best, or the most vocal person, will be the first one to blurt out an estimate, and the whole team will then be biased or influenced by that person. So to avoid this, we use a technique called planning poker. So let's check it out. Firstly, each team member gets a deck of 13 cards like this, and whenever a story is to be estimated, each team member then selects a card that represents his or her time estimate in story points and places it face down on the table. And when all the team members are done, the cards on the table are revealed at the same time. That way, each team member is really forced to think for himself or herself instead of leaning on someone else's estimate. And once all the cards are revealed, if there is a large difference between two estimates, the team then discusses the differences and tries to build a common picture of what work has to be done. And they might do some type of task breakdown. And if you're not familiar with task breakdowns, don't worry about it because we'll cover it in the next lesson. And after this discussion, the team estimates again, and this loop is essentially repeated until the time estimates converge. That is, all estimates are approximately the same size for the story. And it is also important to remind team members that they're not just estimating their portion of the work in the story, but they're estimating the total amount of work involved in the story. So a tester should not just estimate the amount of testing work done, but should be estimating everything. So let's take a closer look at the numbers on the cards. So note firstly that the number sequence is non-linear. For example, there is nothing between 40 and 100. Now why is that? Well, this is firstly to avoid a false sense of accuracy for large time estimates. So if a story is estimated at approximately 20 points, it's not really relevant to discuss whether it should be 20 or 18 or 21. All we know is that it is a large story and that it's hard to estimate. So 20 is a ballpark guess. And here's another way to think about it. If you're buying a house, say for $1 million, would you care if the price is $1,001,000? Probably not. But if you're buying a loaf of bread for $4 and they slap on an additional $1,000 on the price, you most likely would not buy that loaf of bread. And that's because that $1,000 has a material impact on the overall price point. And similarly, as we look at larger stories, our story points need to be increased in a meaningful way or in a non-linear way to have a material impact on the size of that story. So the most common approaches here are the Fibonacci sequence, which essentially is derived by adding the two previous numbers. And then some teams use a modified version of a Fibonacci sequence to round up the larger numbers. So let's quickly come back to the card numbers before we close off this lesson and look at some of the special cards. So a card with 0 on it implies that the story is already done, or it's pretty much nothing left, just a few minutes of work. And a card with a question mark means that the developer has absolutely no idea at all, and this would need further discussion or further clarification. And then finally, the card with the infinity symbol is a way of showing that you feel that the story cannot be completed in the sprint. Okay, so that is the concept of planning poker. Are you ready now for the sprint planning meeting? So in the next lesson, we will have a practical exercise to tie it all together by simulating sprint planning, and it'll also include an exercise on breaking down stories into tasks. All right, I'll see you in sprint planning. Bye for now.